Well, today we conclude our week in talking about being prepared for the return of the Lord, the return of Christ. And someday that will happen, but for many of us, uh, the return is us going to be with the Lord. And so to close the week, I wanted to encourage you to turn to Paul's letter to the Corinthians, to the 15th chapter, and verses 51 through 58. This is part of Paul instructing and teaching the church about the nature of the resurrection, and as Christians we believe in the resurrection of the body. And verse 58, which ends this section, I just think is really, really significant. He writes, "Therefore, my beloved, be steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord, because you know that in the Lord your labor is not in vain." And part of what this says to me is how important it is as Christians to choose the path of courage and endurance. Courage and endurance. I'm going to be talking about that a lot when we get to the season of Advent, the importance of courage and not fear being what shapes our life. And that's what Paul is advocating here at the end of this discussion about the resurrection and the resurrection of the body and how death's going to be swallowed up in victory, and thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. That reminder that God has raised Jesus from the dead, that God will raise us from the dead, that God has given Christ the victory, and through him we have victory. That's what helps to motivate us to keep persevering, to keep going, to have courage, to endure, to be, in that wonderful phrase, steadfast, immovable, always excelling in the work of the Lord. That we always want to be, in the words of an old hymn, we want to give of our best to the Master, give of the strength of our youth. And for some of us who aren't youths anymore, we want to give of the wisdom that we've accumulated and the experience that we have, as well as our physical energy and our time and our talents and abilities. So Paul reminds the church too that in the Lord your labor is not in vain, that what we do for God is never in vain. And in John's Gospel, in the 15th chapter, Jesus reminds his friends, apart from me, you can do nothing. Well, at one level, that's not completely true. I can make myself lunch without Jesus' help. I can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich pretty well at this point in my life. But what does he really mean? He means apart from me, you can do nothing of lasting eternal value. And I think that's what Paul is reminding the Corinthian Christians as well, to remember that in the Lord your labor is not in vain, that there will be a time when there is vindication, when there's reward, and we're going to hear more about that tomorrow and in the coming week when I talk about using what you've been given.